how's it going there, peeps? Phil here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy here, bringing you yet another deck tech. And with Guilds of Ravnica only a few weeks away from here, we're going to have to start thinking about the color combinations that are going to work with those guilds. So this time, we're going to go with a Boros deck. And we're going to start with our low-end creatures, work into our high-end creatures, into our spells, and all the combinations and synergies in between before we start our lands in our sideboard. Okay, well let's get into it. Let's talk about our 1-drops. And the first of our 1-drops is 4 copies of the Rigging Runner. Now the Rigging Runner is a 1/1 goblin that has First Strike, and it also has Raid. So once we've dealt damage or attacked in combat, we can actually put this into play, and it enters with a +1 counter on it, which is going to allow us to have a little bit more strength in our presence in our board, having a 2/2 First Striker, which is really great going forward. Now, the second 1-drop we're going with is 4 copies of Dauntless Bodyguard. Now the Dauntless Bodyguard is also a 1-drop, but it's 2/1, and the Dauntless Bodyguard enters the battlefield. You can choose a target creature, and you can sacrifice the Dauntless Bodyguard to be able to give that target creature indestructible until the end of the turn. So that's going to be really fantastic for any of our other cards going forward, but there's nothing better than being able to play a 1-drop card and then turn 2 start swinging in for 2 damage. It doesn't matter if it hasn't triggered the original ability to be able to do the ETB and make sure we can give something indestructible, because at the end of the day, when you're playing an aggro deck, you really want to be getting the early damage in fast and early so their opponent's automatically on the back foot. Alright, well let's move on to our 2-drops now and talk about how the synergy is going to work. And the first of our 2-drops, we're going with 4 copies of the Raptor Hatchling. Now the Raptor Hatchling is a 2-drop 1/1 with Enrage, and when it's dealt damage, we get to create a 3/3 dinosaur token with Trample. So the fantastic thing about this is if we have the Dauntless Bodyguard, we can play it, we can target the Raptor Hatchling, and then we can give it indestructible. We get a free 3/3 token, or we can even target the Rigging Runner if we want to, making sure that we can get that First Strike damage in exchange with another creature maybe with First Strike, and just sort of keeping our board presence a little bit stronger, because I'm sure we'd rather have a creature that's going to be able to renew creatures like the Raptor Hatchling, who's going to create more creatures for us to go wider and be more aggressive. Alright, let's move on to our next 2-drop, and we'll talk about how that works as well, and that is 4 copies of the Relentless Raptor. Now the Relentless Raptor is fantastic. It's a 2-drop 3/3 with Vigilance that has to attack and block each combat. So the beautiful thing about having the Dauntless Bodyguard and triggering it onto the Relentless Raptor means that we're going to be able to attack freely each turn and not have to worry too much about offensive and defensively whether or not we're going to lose a creature, because we know that we can protect it for a little while and we can advance our board, and it's going to really help us be a little bit more aggressive when we're attacking into our opponents. Alright, well let's talk about our next card that's going to help us tie all of this together and going to help us with our card draw, and we're going to go with 4 copies of the Mentor of Meek. Now it's a 3-drop 2/2 creature. Whenever a creature of the power of 2 or less enters the battlefield, we can pay 1 and draw a card. So the good thing about that is, with the Mentor of Meek coming in, we now have 16 creatures with the power 2 or less to be able to help us with our card draw, and that's going to really help us advance our board as well. And the good thing that helps us with the card drawers means that we're going to be able to get more creatures into play faster, and then we're also going to be able to get wider faster and deal damage faster. Alright, let's move on to some synergy and spells that are going to help us with our creatures, get them wide, get the damage in, and protect them and return them. And that is, we're going with 4 copies of Ajani, Adversary of the Tyrants. Now it's a 4-drop Planeswalker with a loyalty of 4. You can +1 and put 2 +1 counters on up to 2 creatures, and we can do the negative ability where we can -2, and we can return target creature with the converted mana cost of 2 or less from the graveyard to play. Now here's where it gets really good. So we've got 16 creatures that have got the power of the casting cost of 2 or less. They're going to be able to return straight to play. So we don't have to worry too much now about whether or not we lose the Relentless Raptor, because it has to attack and block every combat. Because the beauty of it is we can bring it back with Ajani, and then the following turn give it a +1 counter, making it a 4/4. And a 4/4 Vigilance is really hard to deal with, and our opponent's going to have to start thinking twice about their combat. Alright, and of course the minus ability, that's the ulti for Ajani, being able to create 3 1/1 lifelink cat tokens at the end of the turn is going to be really good for us as well. Because every time one of those 1/1s enters the battlefield, that's 3 opportunities to be able to draw a card if we have 3 mana spare. And the same thing goes for when we're returning creatures from Ajani's negative ability as well, is that when we're returning creatures from the graveyard to play, they're also triggering the Mentor of Meek, which allows us to draw more cards as well. So card draw is going to be really good for us. We are doing quite a lot of reanimation in the deck, but we are being aggressive as well. Okay, moving on, let's talk about our next card, and that is 4 copies of Heroic Reinforcements. It's a 4-drop sorcery speed spell. Create 2 1/1 soldier tokens until the end of the turn. Creatures you control gain +1/+1 and haste. So here's the thing. It's creating 2 soldier tokens, which is also going to trigger the Mentor of Meek. So we're going to be able to draw 2 cards. On top of that, all of our creatures are gaining haste, and they're getting +1/+1. So if we have Ajani in play, we can return the Relentless Raptor or any of our creatures from our graveyard to play. It's going to get +1/+1 and haste as well. So all of them are going to be able to attack. It's really fantastic being able to make sure we can pump all of our creatures across the board and then just start swinging in and giving some damage to our opponents. It's going to make it really hard for our opponents to limit the amount of damage they're going to be able to take. And this is going to be good for us aggressively going forward. Moving on to the next card, we're going to go with another mass pump spell, but something that's going to really help us stabilize our board and protect us from any removal. And that is, we will have 4 copies of Make a Stand. Now, Make a Stand is a 3-drop instant speed. Creatures you control get +1 and gain indestructible till the end of the turn. So it's really fantastic if we get blown out somehow by some sort of combat trick, or if we just don't want some of our creatures to die, or someone's trying to board wipe us. Nonetheless, this is going to help us get damage in as well. It's going to help us with the likes of the Relentless Raptor, who has to attack each turn, that we can manage to keep it in play, and we don't have to worry about any of our smaller token creatures that may have attacked, or even any of our other creatures that we don't want to die who have attacked. Alright, let's move on to the last card in the deck, and we need to talk about some removal, and we're going to go with this card, 4 copies of Settle the Wreckage. Now, Settle the Wreckage is a fantastic card. It's 4-drop, it's instant speed, and we get to remove all attacking creatures from our opponent. The great thing is it's not just destroying them, it's exiling them. So they're not going to be able to reanimate them from the graveyard or do any sort of shenanigans like that. But there is the downside, they will get to get a land out of their library for each creature destroyed this way. Nonetheless, a good card. Alright, well, let's move on to our land in our sideboard. Alright, well, let's move into the lands, and we're going to keep it real simple. We're going to go with 8 mountains, 8 plains, 4 Clifftop Retreats, and 4 Memorials to Glory. Now, the Memorial to Glory is in here for the same reason we have the Mentor of Meek, being able to sacrifice it to be able to create 2 1/1 soldier tokens. It's going to help us draw into cards. It's also going to help us put creatures on the board and give us more presence going forward. Being able to put +1 counters on them with Ajani makes them stronger. Being able to put +1 counters on any of our creatures with Ajani for that matter. And also making sure that we can give them the ability to get in aggressively if we play the likes of our Heroic Reinforcements, because that's going to give us an additional 2 creatures. So we sack Memorial to Glory and we play Heroic Reinforcements, means that we're going to end up having an additional 8 damage that we can deal to our opponents, and that's really, really difficult to deal with if our opponents don't have enough defense. Alright, and that's pretty simple, and we're going to keep it like that. And let's move on to our sideboard now. Now, our sideboard is sole purpose based for one sort of strategy, and we're going to go with a bit of a first strike strategy. And the reason for that is because we all know how difficult dealing with first strike creatures are. But defensively, that's even better. Being able to block with multiple first strike creatures means it's impossible for our opponents to actually attack into it, because they're more likely going to lose all of their creatures because we can just gang up. Okay, but anyway, Let's get into these cards rather than talking about them. And we got the first of our creatures we're going with is 3 copies of Danitha, Capashen, Paragon. This 3-drop 2/2 legendary knight has first strike, vigilance, and lifelink, or as an equipment spells cost 1 less to cast. The fantastic thing is she enters the battlefield. She's 2/2. It triggers the Mentor of Meek. We can draw a card. We can't search it out with Ajani, but we can pump her up with Ajani, making her stronger. And that's good offensively and defensively. Alright, well, let's move on to the next card, and that is 3 copies of Quende, Pride of Femeref. Now, Quende is a 4-drop, but he is also 2/2, which means he does trigger the Mentor of Meek, but he also is double strike, and his ability is creatures with first strike have double strike. So that's really fantastic for us, because that means any of our first strike creatures are going to be able to deal double damage, which is really handy for us, especially being an aggressive deck. especially if we have all these first strike creatures attacking and we've played a heroic intervention. Moving on to our next creature, and that is 3 copies of Direfleet Daredevil. Now the Daredevil is a 2-drop 2/1 and its first strike, but when it enters the battlefield, we can exile a sorcery instant card from our opponent's graveyard and we may cast it as though we had the mana to spend to pay for that spell. So that's really fantastic. Being able to put the Direfleet Daredevil into the play at late game or even mid game is really good for us. If we've got that mana to spare, we can use the opponent's spells against them. Not only that, we're taking it out of their graveyard, so they're not going to be able to recycle any of their spells from their graveyard to play, and that's going to be really helpful for us. Secondly, the Daredevil's also first strike, so if we have Quenda or any of our other first strike strategies in play, it's going to make it really hard for our opponents to remove them, as we can put +1 counters on them with the Ajani, or even pump them up with the heroic intervention or the make a stand. Alright, well, let's move on to our last first strike creature, and that is 3 copies of Encampment Keeper. Now the Encampment Keeper is a fairly common card and it's probably overlooked a lot because of its ability or its lack of ability. I guess in this deck it could be quite helpful for us. A 1/1 that's first strike that costs 1 is good. Going forward, being able to pump it up with a Ajani, giving it +1 counters, but also late game, being able to sacrifice the Encampment Keeper to give creatures we control +2/+2 till the end of the turn means that we're going to be able to make sure that we can pump our creatures up really fast. Now, the awesome thing I like about the Encampment Keeper is we can sacrifice it pre-combat and then bring it back with a Ajani. Alright, well, let's move on to the last creature in our deck. And this creature is going to help us with our main deck abilities, and that is 3 copies of Forerunner of the Empire. Now the Forerunner of the Empire is a 4-drop 1/3, but when the Forerunner enters the battlefield, we can search our library for a dinosaur card, reveal it, and put it on the top of our library. When dinosaurs enter the battlefield under our control, we may have the Forerunner of the Empire deal 1 damage to each creature. So this is going to be really awesome. It is going to trigger the Enrage for our Raptor Hatchling. It's also going to help us deal 1 damage to our opponent's creatures. So doing that means that we can be quite aggressive. It means that we can also use the ability that the Chain Whirler or the Plague Mare has, and just taking out any 1/1s from our opponent's boards. But yeah, the Forerunner of the Emperor is very helpful. It also triggers the Mentor of the Meek, and I think that's really important that we all have the synergy working together. But the decision's really yours at the end of the day. Sideboards are sideboards for a reason, and it allows you to pick and choose what kind of strategy you want to have with your decks. But anyway, I hope you guys liked this. I'm Phil from MTG Kiwi Philosophy here. Don't forget to smash that like button, share and subscribe, and I guess I'll catch you on the flip side. But don't forget, Guilds of Ravnica are coming out soon, and you could probably tailor this deck to your own needs and add what you want, and you never know. The possibilities could be fun and exciting. I'll catch you later. Ciao.